Hi, my name is Philip Duggan, and today I'm going to be talking to you about virtual reality and physical rehabilitation. Virtual reality is a simple term, however, there can be some misconceptions about what it actually means. For me, the best definition comes from the Oxford Dictionary, which reads the computer generated simulation of a three dimensional image or environment that can be interacted with in a seemingly real or physical way by a person using special electronic equipment such as a helmet with a screen inside or gloves fitted with sensors. Virtual reality has taken many forms since its inception. This has varied from user mounted hardware to installations placed in rooms. The most common variant available today would be a HMD, or head mounted display. Just think of those funny looking helmets with a block at the front that you see advertised on television. That's a head mounted display and is the most common form of virtual reality we have today. Other forms of virtual reality include the CAVE system. That stands for Cave Automatic Virtual Environment, where a room is set up with a number of screens and back projectors, and then images are then projected onto the screens. The users are then able to enter the room and immerse themselves into the virtual world. Additionally, flight simulators are also encompassed under the term virtual reality. This isn't a new technology. Virtual reality has been researched for over 50 years, with its beginnings stemming from the late 1950s. The reason the technology seems to be newer is due to the growth happening in the virtual reality industry, with video game and entertainment companies scrambling to invest in this so called new technology. Rehabilitation is effectively defined as the restoration of something to full working order, whether that be physically, mentally, or otherwise. The term rehabilitation is so broad that it isn't limited to just living organisms, however, and can be effectively applied to anything in our world. There are multiple reasons why someone would require some form of rehabilitation. These can range from adjusting someone's behaviors and enabling them to function in society in the case of mental rehabilitation, to helping a person improve their mobility and even on to recovery from some form of injury in the case of physical rehabilitation. Focusing in on physical rehabilitation, there are multiple reasons why one may require treatment. The most common example being to aid a patient in recovering from some form of injury, whether that's been a stroke, repetitive strain injuries from works or hobbies, or just an accident that may have happened to them at the time. What physical rehabilitation entails is the patient being put through a regimen of exercises which seek to optimize their muscular control, balance, flexibility, and build their strength. The hope is that upon completing the regimen that the patient will have resumed the majority, if not all, of the functionality they had originally lost. One would think there could be little connection between virtual reality and entertainment technology and physical rehabilitation. However, there's a growing connection between these two. Virtual reality is now being employed by some to further augment regimens and supersede any psychosomatic barriers that could inhibit a patient's recovery. A prime example of this connection is VR Physio, a Tel Aviv based company which is testing a PC based VR platform to treat physical therapy patients in Boston. Aaron Orr founded the startup due to his difficulty completing his own regimens and finding a capable therapist to treat his ailment. He noticed that it was hard to gauge progress and wanted to change this to help patients recover faster. In treatment for the patients with whiplash, VR Physio outfits a patient with a head mounted display and then asks the user to look at barrels in the environment. They are then able to read the data from the equipment to better gauge the patient's progress. In turn, this information allows a doctor or therapist to better assess their patient's needs and prescribe patient specific treatment rather than the general norm. The connection between virtual reality and physical rehabilitation is also being explored within the educational realm in addition to the commercial environment. Dr. Gustavo Sapoznik of the University of Toronto conducted a study into if virtual reality could benefit the rehabilitation of stroke victims, as he found the traditional therapy only provided modest benefit. The results? He found that from analyzing 12 studies on the side effects of virtual reality on stroke recovery, that on average, those who were treated using virtual reality were 4.9 times more likely to improve their upper body strength in comparison to those treated with traditional therapy. Additionally, some of those studies showed a 14% improvement in grip strength of those who were treated using virtual reality. We can see that there are benefits to using virtual reality to help in physical rehabilitation. It removes the insecurities of the patient by placing them into a safe virtual environment that allows the therapist to better assess a patient's needs. Additionally, the employment of virtual reality technology will allow for better development of therapies to better suit patient needs and allow for patient specific therapy. In a paper written by Heidi Silverstrup, it is highlighted how virtual reality will allow doctors and therapists to engage in behaviors in challenging but safe, ecologically valid environments while maintaining experimental control over stimulus delivery and measurement. Additionally, she concludes that virtual reality hardware will allow us for a better understanding of movement. However, there's a major need for continued development and use of the technology based around the understanding of voluntary movement. With all of this in mind, it begs the question, if it works, why isn't it being used? Firstly, virtual reality has seen some major developments in the last 15 years, and is constantly changing. As a result, the technology is not inviting to the uninitiated, especially considering it's being introduced into a new industry based around well documented information. It is understandable why the technology is slow to be adopted. Additionally, one of the major barriers to the widespread adoption of the technology is the cost, both monetary and time. While virtual reality is getting cheaper and easier for the consumer to access, it's still quite expensive for most, which is preventative in quite a large number of cases. Additionally, while some may be able to cover the initial costs, maintenance and necessary upgrades could be quite costly. Of course, with any new technology comes training, and that can take some time. You could argue that it isn't terribly hard to learn. However, one must remember that a therapist will need to be able to use the data that they receive from the equipment, and they will need to know how to set up the equipment properly. This would effectively waste their time, as they could be spending that time treating patients, and as such, it acts as a deterrent for many of them. The future of virtual reality and physical rehabilitation is centered around the adoption of the technology and the development of the technology. Right now, virtual reality is constantly evolving and becoming more popular as a result. Development is widespread, and fortunately, it isn't isolated to just video games in the entertainment industry, but the technology needs more adoption to fuel focused development. As it's already been mentioned, adoption of this technology is slow occurrent. However, if development of virtual reality technologies continues at its current pace, we will most certainly see a more widespread adoption from those who work in the area of physical rehabilitation. With further adoption, development of this niche will grow to newer and better heights, which will ultimately form a better technology for everyone. Thank you for listening.